So welcome back to Shop, everybody. My name is Andy with Bow Works today. In this video, we're going to be going over the steps that are going to be involved for making an old through hull that is no longer needed, making that go away. Now, in this particular instance, the reason we're removing this through hull is more of a liability issue than anything else. Something we're going to be doing that's going to be a little bit unique on this is that we're not necessarily going to be eliminating both holes on the top as well as the bottom. We're going to maintain the hole that's on the top here. It's just the way that it drains is going to be rerouted. Now, the bottom side, that's a different story. Down here, this has been the liability. So the actual inlet up inside the boat, this is still below the water line, obviously. And water was backflowing, and if the little drain tubes happen to crack or pop off, they ended up being no bueno. So for closing up this area, we're going to be using several different products, but the main material we're going to be used for actually closing up this hole is going to be the Total Boat 5-to-1 epoxy with 1708. And then we're also going to be doing the fairing with their Total Fair. Again, we're trying to keep all of the products involved here epoxy-based. So after the fairing has been done, we'll apply our barrier coat and then finally finish all of that off with their Krypton bottom paint.
So this is just a little model of what we were dealing with here. So this was the hull surface. This had a traditional rounded flange on the exterior of the hull. So looking at the nut on the inside, this was never coming off, so I just started cutting. I cut the flange off after segmenting it, cut it this way, and then cut it this way to get rid of it, but was unable to pound this through, a lot of surface area, so then I cut it vertically inside with a jigsaw to segment it, and then was able to just pry two of these edges free, and then it was able to pop out from the inside of the boat.
Just kind of take a little bit of a closer look here. You kind of see, I mean, this was the original install, most likely, right?
Almost certainly.
Yeah, I mean, this nut is so corroded on, there wasn't anything that was going to bust that loose. So, I mean, the only way to get it out was to give it some horsepower and rip and tear it, I guess.
Yeah, violence was required. But you mentioned yesterday, Andy, when we first looked at the intro to this project, that these are a liability, and one of the things you can see here, the way this was installed, this was the cockpit drain from the inside of the locker just to the outside, which is below the waterline here. So an improper installation here because they just simply clamped the hose onto the threads of the through hull.
Right, and if that hose were to ever fail, I mean, and it's already kind of getting old, aged, and cracked. I mean, if that hose fails, you got an open hole through the bottom of the boat, and that's game over at that point.
Absolutely. So the correct install, if you were doing a new one here, you'd put a new through hull in, bed it in with some 5200 as below the waterline, and then you'd have a hose barb on top of this thread to have the proper mating surface, because you really can't ever get a great seal on these threads. The water will wick through. So now we've got our hole through the hull that will just grind back a nice taper and glass from the inside. And if you do have access, I think you would also glass it inside, wouldn't you think?
Well, ideally, yeah. Below the waterline, if it's at all possible, it's best to try and address that from both the top and the bottom. Meet it halfway. So right now this hull is roughly, which is kind of surprising, it was about ½ inch. It's solid glass. So ideally, we would kind of split that difference, say, bring it in a 1/4 inch taper from the bottom, and then a 1/4 inch taper, coming in from the top, and then just kind of build in, that material that was removed. So it's, being addressed on both sides. Now, that's not always possible in situations where you don't have access to both sides, and it happens. At that point, then rather than doing the standard, say 12-to-1 taper, for getting everything prepped for the glasswork, it would be better to try and almost double that. So you don't necessarily have to go all the way up to like a 24-to-1, but I would say go up to, say, like a 16-to-1 taper if you're only able to address it from one side, and that's typically going to be from the exterior side. But I think we can find a way to make this work from both sides. All right, so up to this point, we have gotten all of the surfaces prepped that are going to be receiving fiberglass yet, at least for today. So right now, we've got some material being cut over on the bench, and in the meantime, I'm coming back over with some cleaner, degreaser, dewaxer, solvent just to wipe down all the areas so they have a chance for the solvent to evaporate. And then after that is done, then it's officially go time. For the glass work here on the old through hull, the way that we're going to accomplish, or the way that we're going to approach this, because we're on an upside down surface, we're going to wet out, I believe we decided on we're going to do 4 layers of 1708. We're going to wet all that material out on the bench on top of some peel ply. Basically, we're going to stack it up wet on wet on wet. 4 layers, starting with the smallest piece and then working our way up larger and larger in size until the last piece is the actual size of the area that we had tapered. Once we have all that material wet out and stacked, we're going to go back over and make sure we work out any excess resin, if there's any air trapped in between the laminates, get all that worked out, and then we're going to pick up the entire stack by hand, pick it all up, and then in one shot, just stick it in place, and then work out, again, we're going to work out any defects, if there's some air that got trapped beneath the laminate, get all that worked out, and once we're happy with that, then we walk away for a little bit.
So we're on to the interior repair of the through hull that we've started yesterday. Yesterday we removed the old through hull, ground the exterior, and glassed the exterior. Today we're going to put a layer of 2 layers of glass on the inside, the 1708. So we're going to use the 5-to-1 epoxy as we did on the outside. I'm going to mix a cup of straight resin, wet out my glass products, and then I'm going to take the remaining resin and turn it into a peanut butter consistency filler that I will use to swipe on the inside to make up for some of the lows that we have from the grinding and the actual through hull. So I'm going to add both the glass microballoons thickener and the silica thickener to make a nice stiff putty that I can trowel on the inside before I lay down the wet glass. So it's 1 cup of resin. We're going to do both jobs with it and get our entire glass work done. So the next step in our through hull repair is to apply some Total Fair on the outside to smooth over the low areas before we put the barrier coat on. So we're going to mix this new and improved formula Total Fair 1-to-1 just by volume. Got individual sticks that I'm going to use. You don't want to use the same stick in both buckets because you can contaminate the other bucket. You can see this is a pot we've been working with, but you get a little bit of this oxidation on the top. This is totally normal. It's just some slight discoloration from the formula, but it's all fine. This will just mix right in. Nothing to worry about there. I'm just going to eyeball the amounts. We're looking for consistency and color. Much of it's turning green. And just so I don't have any trouble with unmixed elements. I'm not going to work from my mixing sheet. I'm just going to take the mixed product, put that on a new sheet so I don't have any of this stuff on the edges that isn't quite incorporated. Now the trick when you're applying fairing, especially a final fairing, you want to get rid of all the air bubbles in the material that you're putting down. So in this case, I'll take the Total Fair and I'm just going to pull it on my sheet, and you can see the air bubbles. Like there's an air bubble. I'm just trying to get rid of all those bubbles so that when I trowel it down, you can see as you pull and get rid of the air, the surface becomes smoother and smoother. So that's what I'm looking for when I do my final pull on the boat with the fairing, that it's nice and smooth and bubble free. For me, that looks pretty good. A couple of small air bubbles, but I don't think I can make it much smoother than that at this point. For this application on the bottom, that'll be sand, and we'll go straight to barrier coat from that.
Easy peasy. Now it's time to have some fun, splash the boat, and enjoy the weekend.